The red and blue lights painted my driveway in alternating flashes as two squad cars rolled to a stop in front of my house. Through the window, I could see my 16-year-old daughter, Emily, standing frozen on our porch, her overnight bag still clutched in her trembling hands. Two officers were already approaching her, their hands resting cautiously on their duty belts. And they're standing at the edge of my property with her arms crossed and a smug smile plastered across her face was Patricia Hawthorne, the HOA president of Maple Ridge Estates. She had no idea she just made the biggest mistake of her petty, power-hungry life. Let me back up a bit. My name is David Garrison, and I've been a circuit court judge in Jefferson County for the past 12 years. After my divorce 3 years ago, Emily started splitting her time between my house here in Maple Ridge and her mother's place across town. The arrangement worked well for everyone, except apparently Patricia Hawthorne, who seemed to view every visitor to our gated community as a potential threat to her miniature kingdom. Patricia had been the HOA president for 5 years, and in that time she transformed what should have been a simple homeowners association into her personal thief. She memorized every rule, enforced them with religious fervor, and took particular pleasure in catching residents in violations. Garbage cans visible from the street after 6 p.m., that's a $50 fine. Grass half an inch too long, another citation. She once fined my neighbor $200 for having their Christmas decorations up past January 2nd. But her favorite pastime was monitoring who came and went from the neighborhood. She'd installed herself as the unofficial gatekeeper, despite having no actual authority to question visitors. I'd seen her interrogate delivery drivers, harass contractors, and follow unfamiliar cars through the neighborhood, like some sort of suburban vigilante. Most of us just rolled our eyes and dealt with it, figuring it wasn't worth the hassle of confronting her. That changed the day she targeted my daughter. Emily had just arrived for her weekend visit. Her mother had dropped her off at the gate, and she'd walked the 2 blocks to my house like she'd done dozens of times before. I was in my home office reviewing case files for Monday's docket when I heard the commotion outside. At first, I thought it was just kids playing in the street, but then I heard the unmistakable crackle of police radios. I rushed to the front door to find my daughter, surrounded by 2 officers, tears streaming down her face. She was trying to explain that she lived here, that I was her father, but Patricia kept interrupting, her shrill voice cutting through Emily's attempts to speak. "I saw her sneaking around the back of the house," Patricia was saying, gesturing wildly with her hands. "She was clearly casing the place. I've never seen her before, and I know everyone in this neighborhood. This is obviously some troubled teen looking to break into homes while the owners are at work." The officers, to their credit, seemed skeptical. The taller one, whose nameplate read Officer Chen, was trying to calm the situation. "Ma'am," he said, "she lives here. She has a key to the house." "Of course, she has a key," Patricia scoffed. "She probably stole it or made a copy." These kids are crafty. I've seen it on the news. They stake out neighborhoods, figure out when people aren't home, and then they strike. I'm telling you, I prevented a burglary here. You should be thanking me. That's when I stepped outside. "Is there a problem here, officers?" Patricia's eyes lit up when she saw me. "I just caught this girl trying to break into your house. Don't worry, I called 911 immediately." I walked calmly down the porch steps, pulling my wallet from my pocket. "That won't be necessary. Officers, this is my daughter, Emily." I handed Officer Chen my driver's license and judicial identification card. "She's here for her court-ordered visitation weekend." The change in the atmosphere was immediate. Officer Chen's eyes widened slightly as he examined my credentials. His partner, a younger officer whose badge read Mitchell, actually took a small step back. They both knew me, of course. I'd presided over dozens of cases involving their department. "Judge Garrison," Officer Chen said, his tone now formal and respectful. "I apologize for the confusion. We received a call about a potential burglary in progress." Patricia's smug expression began to falter. "Wait, what? No, that can't be right. I've never seen this girl before. She can't possibly Hawthorne," I said, turning to face her directly, my voice carrying the same authority I used in my courtroom. "This is my daughter, Emily. She's been visiting me every other weekend for the past 3 years. The fact that you haven't noticed her before says more about your observation skills than her right to be here." Patricia's face flushed red. "Well, How was I supposed to know? She was acting suspicious, walking around the back of the house like that. The back of the house. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the path from the street to our front door? The one she uses because she knows. I keep the side gate locked. I tried to tell her dad. I said I was your daughter, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept screaming at me to get off the property or she'd call the cops. And then she actually did it. Officer Mitchell was already pulling out his notepad. Ms. Hawthorne, did this young lady identify herself to you before you called 911? Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Well, she might have said something, but I didn't believe her. Anyone could claim to be someone's daughter. I was just being cautious. You can't be too careful these days. Actually, Officer Chen interjected, you can be too careful. Filing a false police report is a crime. Ms. Hawthorne, you called 911 claiming a burglary in progress when, in fact, you were witnessing a teenager entering her father's home with permission. It wasn't false, Patricia protested, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. You genuinely believed that harassment could be mistaken for neighborhood watch. I said, my tone sharp enough to cut. Glass, tell me, Ms. Hawthorne, how many other residents' children have you called the police on? How many legitimate visitors have you terrorized with your vigilante routine? The officers exchanged glances. This was clearly not their first encounter with Patricia's overzealous behavior. Officer Mitchell flipped through his notepad. Actually, Judge Garrison, we've responded to several calls from Ms. Hawthorne over the past year. Most of them turned out to be false alarms. I'm trying to keep this neighborhood safe, Patricia insisted, but she was backing away now. Her arms no longer crossed, but hanging limply at her sides. No, I corrected her. You're trying to control this neighborhood. There's a difference. And today, you crossed a line. You didn't just harass a visitor, you traumatized a minor. My minor, my daughter. Officer Chen stepped forward. Ms. Hawthorne, I'm issuing you a formal warning for misuse of emergency services. This incident will be documented. If there's a pattern of false reports, you could face criminal charges. Patricia's face had gone from red to pale. You can't do that. I'm the HOA president. I have a responsibility. Your responsibility, I interrupted, is to manage the common areas and enforce actual HOA bylaws. Nowhere in those bylaws does it give you the authority to act as law enforcement. And I should know. I reviewed them thoroughly before purchasing this home. I turned to the officers. Gentlemen, I'll be filing a formal complaint, not just with your department, but with the HOA board. This behavior needs to be addressed officially. That's your right, Your Honor, Officer Chen said. He turned to Patricia one more. Time, ma'am. I suggest you familiarize yourself with what constitutes an actual emergency. Wasting police resources is a serious matter. As the officers returned to their vehicles, Patricia stood there, seemingly frozen in place. The small crowd of neighbors that had gathered to watch the spectacle began to disperse, but not before I caught several of them nodding approvingly. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd had enough of Patricia's reign of terror. This isn't over, Patricia finally managed to sputter. I'll be discussing this at the next board meeting. Your daughter might be allowed to visit, but there are procedures. Guest registrations, proper notifications. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, let's discuss this right now. I believe I have board member Jennifer Rodriguez. On speed dial, she's an attorney, you know. I'm sure she'd be very interested to hear about how the HOA president called the police on a resident's child. Patricia's eyes widened as I began scrolling through my contacts. That's not necessary. We can handle this internally. Oh, I think it is necessary, I said, finding Jennifer's number. You see, Ms. Hawthorne, you've been operating under the assumption that your position gives you unlimited authority. But every organization has checks and balances, even an HOA. The next few weeks were interesting, to say the least. True. To my word, I filed formal complaints with both the police department and the HOA board. The story spread through Maple Ridge like wildfire. Patricia Hawthorne, the iron-fisted HOA president, had called the cops on Judge Garrison's daughter. The woman who loved to tout her connections and influence had just alienated one of the most respected legal figures in the county. The emergency board meeting was held 2 weeks later. The community clubhouse was packed with residents, many of whom had their own stories about Patry.